All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. For those of you in Eastern and Central Time Zone, good afternoon. For people like myself in Mountain and Pacific Time, good morning. Thank you for being with us here today. I hope everyone is staying safe and being healthy in these challenging times. We are very excited about our new Wednesday webinar series, and we are so thankful that all of you were able to join us today for our first presentation, Never Do Inventory Again with circTRAK Shelf Manager. As this is our first webinar that we're hosting, and it may be your first webinar that you're participating in with GoToWebinar, we just wanted to do a few housekeeping things before we get started. First off, this webinar is being recorded, so people will be able to view it after the fact. Also, because this topic was so popular, we actually had to close enrollment to this room because we had 100 people that registered for this webinar. So if you have any colleagues or any friends within the library industry who wanted to participate in this webinar but weren't able to, we're actually going to be doing an encore presentation of this webinar next Wednesday, same time, 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific. There's going to be an email that's sent to you automatically when we close this webinar that will include both the web address where the video of this presentation is going to be posted, as well as the registration link for next week's encore presentation. So if you'd like to share that with your staff members or your colleagues, you will be welcome to do so. Quickly, we're going to run through the GoToWebinar interface, just in case it's unfamiliar to you. So currently, everyone who's viewing this presentation is on mute. We do that just so that way there isn't background noise or conflicting sound. If any of you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can click this little questions icon and it'll open up a toolbox for you. If you type a question, that will come directly to me. Simple questions, kind of one-off questions, I may be able to answer those directly in line. But if you have a question that's good for the group or something that we'll be discussing, I'll probably respond to you that we will address it later on in the webinar when we get to the dedicated question and answer session. Please keep in mind, right now we have 66 attendees in this webinar. So if you ask a question and I don't get to you instantaneously, it's because I'm addressing other questions, but I promise I will respond to you and you'll see a little indicator in that chat box. Also, we have 3 documents or 3 handouts that are attached to this webinar. You are welcome to download those. They're all PDFs. We will also send a follow-up email after this webinar is completed with those documents. So if you don't download them during the session, you'll be able to receive them after the fact. My name is Anthony Fry. I am the Director of Marketing for TechLogic. I have been so for about a year now. Prior to taking the TechLogic Marketing Director position, I was the Senior Solution Specialist in the Pacific region. So if your library is in California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, the Yukon Territories, Alaska, or Hawaii, there's a good chance that we have crossed paths over the past couple of years. But I am very excited to be working with TechLogic and doing these webinars to help get some information to libraries like yourselves. As you can see in my photo, I love the outdoors. That's my wife and I were in Moab a couple months ago. But we have stepped back from doing the outdoorsy things that we love to do because we are actually expecting our first child here in about 4 weeks. So that's a little bit about myself, but now I'd like to pass on the microphone to Miss Gretchen Freeman, who is our Principal Librarian and Strategist and will be leading the majority of this discussion today on the circTRAK Shelf Manager. So take it away, Gretchen.
Thank you, Anthony. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the TechLogic Wednesday webinar series. Hey, thanks for doing some social distancing with us today for about 45 minutes. And thanks for the work you do in libraries. Our libraries are so resilient, and you're proving that right now and serving the communities in very different ways. My friend has just joined an online book club at her library called Pants On Book Club. I think that's great. So thank you for everything that you do. I recognize the names of many of the libraries that are tuning in today. From my post at Salt Lake County or as a librarian here on staff at TechLogic, we may have talked along the way about your RFID implementation or another project. So many of you are familiar friends. I wish I could see your faces. My favorite topics are workflow and process changes after technology implementation. Most of you know TechLogic from its leadership in automated material handling, self-checkout, and RFID. TechLogic created and installed the first AMH system for libraries in Greensboro Public Library in 1998. That system is still in operation 22 years later. TechLogic unique throw-and-go book drops have proven themselves as hands-down favorites, certainly for our patrons, where they can place materials in the slot just like they've always done. And I might add, there are no touch screens. Along with their 4 unique self-checkout solutions, TechLogic has helped hundreds of libraries with RFID conversions. The RFID product we're talking about today is circTRAK Shelf Manager. I assume most of those attending today have converted to RFID. So you know about its benefits for multi-item checkout and check-in, item security, and faster AMH processing. But the icing on the RFID cake is that long-awaited promise to improve shelf and collection management, and that's our topic today. TechLogic's circTRAK Shelf Manager has been delivering on that promise for years. In fact, it has shifted the paradigm for shelf management in many public libraries, some of you, I'm sure, and has won 2 Modern Library Awards for creative solutions. Anthony, are the slides advancing?
They are, yes. Do you not see them?
No, I'm not getting an advance, but that's fine. circTRAK Shelf Manager consists of a battery-powered RFID scanning wand that's shown here, and the circTRAK software running on a Microsoft Surface tablet. Those 2 pieces out in the stacks deliver 4 broad categories of functions: locating lists of items, verifying that security on the tags is active, or gathering barcodes for a traditional inventory or in-house use counts. Today, though, we're focusing on what we recommend as the primary use of circTRAK, which is dynamic status check, and particularly as a replacement for inventory. Whether or not your library currently performs inventories, here are a few reasons why inventory should be largely discontinued by RFID libraries. We know it's time and labor intensive. It's a huge investment in tedious one-by-one barcode reads of items on the shelf and then behind the scenes processing on the ILS. Just a lot of time and labor involved. It's also a time-sensitive snapshot of what's on the shelves. It's only there at the moment that you scan, which means that the inventory results are almost immediately out of date. Public library collections churn quickly. By that I mean they transition in and out, and we want them to. You think about circulation activity every day, or about regular weeding, replacements, new acquisitions. Our collections are very active on the shelves. They need to be dynamic and fresh. That's what we want them to be. Finally, inventories require a process of manual cleanup. So after all the barcodes are gathered and processed, the ILS creates a list of exceptions, and we're right back out to the shelves to retrieve exceptions. So what I suggest is that an RFID library shift from that traditional inventory mindset to active shelf management. The goal is still to clean up the catalog, and that can be accomplished if you're using shelf management process on a regular basis. We can avoid that large labor cost of a one-time inventory and invest just a fraction of that labor in regular shelf management processing. It's one more way to leverage your investment in RFID, that considerable investment, and this is yet another way that we can save labor with RFID. It's really the final delivery on that promise of RFID to improve customer service by locating or removing materials. So what is shelf management? Shelf management is managing the physical items on our shelves. So different than collection management, which has to do with content, but the physical items on the shelves. So our goal is to have a reliable, clean catalog of that collection. We'll see in a moment how quickly we can scan a section for exceptions. circTRAK is simple, easy to use, easy to learn for all levels of staff. There are no lists to load. I should emphasize that. There are no lists to load. And there are no printed reports to handle. So all of those manual printed reports you may have been using go away. Everything is reported in one scan, all exceptions, and a list of every exception on the shelves, all in real-time ILS searches. That's why it's called dynamic status check. Your ILS may use slightly different terminology for exceptions, such as these, but what we know is that they should not be on our shelves in these statuses. They represent items that should be at another branch or are misplaced or still attached to a patron record in the worst case. So each of these statuses is the result of an action that didn't go quite as planned. And every library accumulates them in the normal course of business, every library. The difference is that up to now, exceptions were only cleared up with manual reports or infrequent inventories. We can do better with RFID. Both of those methods to clean up exceptions are limited in scope and quickly outdated as new exceptions are generated. So here's how circTRAK performs shelf management in 4 simple steps. Your staff member connects circTRAK to the library's ILS in a secured Wi-Fi connection. There's no timing or continuity as we need with inventory. They can move out into the stacks and start scanning any range or collection in any order at any time. circTRAK sends a SIP query to your ILS asking for the status of each item on the shelf, and then it listens for the response, all of this in millisecond speed. Your ILS returns the status of each item, and circTRAK is checking that status to determine if it's the normal in or available or on-shelf status or something else. So circTRAK is checking for all those statuses at the same time in real time. And finally, if the status is an exception, circTRAK alerts the staff member with an audible and on-screen alert. The staff member can use the title and barcode information that's displayed to pull exceptions from the shelves. Some ILSs also return call number information in the response. Each exception is placed on a book truck, perhaps stacked or arranged by category, and then resolved behind the scenes by circulation staff. Remember, a patron record may still be attached to some of these exceptions and may need a remedy applied, such as waiving fines, lost book charges, or replacing a hold request. Let's take a look at a short clip of circTRAK performing dynamic status check. Once I start scanning, you'll see that the list on the right, the read list, is populating with the titles I've scanned. The red flash indicates I've found an exception, and those are populating on the found list to the left. You can see I've found an item that is still checked out, an item that is missing, a deleted item, and 2 holds. Libraries such as Queen's Library in New York have adopted circTRAK system-wide for problem solving. circTRAK becomes an active partner for staff whenever an item isn't where it's supposed to be. So what causes that? Well, we know the items can be routed incorrectly, they can be misshelved by a helpful patron. The call number on the spine might not match the call number in the catalog. The item left the library without being checked out. All of those sorts of situations are creating missing materials, and in Queens, they're being looked for with manual reports. That could be the case in your library too. So with circTRAK, the missing status becomes a friend instead of a nagging manual to-do list. And oftentimes, libraries search in the same location to find missing materials multiple times. When you assist a patron to find material, or you're pulling your holds pick list, you're gathering weeds, and you don't find an item on the shelf, then immediately change the status of the item to missing. You'll find those anywhere in the library, along with every other exception, the next time you scan. How long do I keep my materials in missing status? That depends on how often you're scanning and the policy and timelines that your library uses. But instead of one massive cleanup from inventory, you're scanning for missing materials on an ongoing basis to consider for replacement or removal. What if I inadvertently delete a missing item that is still on my shelves? In our former barcode world, there was no way to find these items. Once they're removed from the catalog, they'll never appear on a report again. But with circTRAK and RFID, these materials are rescued. So as you scan with circTRAK, it reads an active tag in the deleted item and sends a query to the ILS. The ILS returns a title not found message or 00 status to tell you that this item doesn't have a catalog record, an item record any longer. So the staff member can retrieve the item using its barcode number, and at that point, collection librarians can either return the item to the catalog or remove it from the collection. So finding those missing or deleted items, as Salt Lake County has done for years with circTRAK, saves thousands of hours of staff time and dollars for replacing materials. They call it a treasure hunt. Remember too that there's another part of the treasure hunt. So materials that are claim return or still checked out are linked to patron records. And if you find those on the shelves, you're saving staff time dealing with calls and with patron frustration. If claimed return items are a chronic problem in your library, you can also use circTRAK to scan book trucks before they're shelved. So you're proactively making sure everything is checked in before it goes out to the shelves. I've seen that used very effectively. Finally, let's see circTRAK in action at the shelves to give you an idea of the speed of scanning. Your staff will find many other uses for circTRAK, and I promise that it will not gather dust in the back room. Using TechLogic's circTRAK Shelf Manager is the most efficient way I know to do active shelf management, to keep the catalog clean and improve patron service. circTRAK is listed at $5,600, but as a webinar participant, you'll be emailed a coupon for circTRAK at $49.95. Get them now. Hey, thank you for tuning into our Wednesday webinar series. Let's turn to your questions for a few minutes.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for submitting the questions. And I apologize for that little delay at the beginning with the pause slides. Hopefully that was resolved. Gretchen, the first question that came in that I'd like to throw your way is, how often should I scan our collection? Is there a rule of thumb to follow with the frequency of doing so?
Well, circTRAK makes it easy to do, and so there's no reason not to scan regularly, and you keep the catalog cleaner, patron issues are resolved. One branch I know, a collection of about 100,000 items, scans their collection monthly by assigning ranges to the shelvers. Each shelver has their designated ranges, and the shelvers are asked to scan their ranges over the course of the month. At the end of their shifts, they have extra time, take circTRAK out and scan their ranges. Then they keep a chart posted about which ranges have been scanned, and during the course of the month, scan the entire collection. So it has netted a very clean catalog, and it also means that they're very proactive about setting materials into missing status, and scanning the entire collection to find everything that's out there. So really depends, but I would say more often is better, and that helps get your missing materials resolved and patron issues resolved.
The next question that we got, can you use the wand for pulling holds?
Good question. I don't recommend it for several reasons. I mean, we would love to think that this solves our hold pull problems, but here's a couple reasons. Holds are widely dispersed throughout the library. They're not in one neat section. And so scanning to find them will probably take more time than finding holds in a manual process. Also, sometimes you can substitute a different edition of a title. So we're looking to pull holds. We don't find the edition that's on our holds pull list, but we find another edition, and we can substitute that edition to fill the customer's hold. So people are much better at doing that substitution. And then finally, I would say holds pick lists are often split up among staff. And so this, if you're spreading the work across several people, I mean, clearly you would have to have either more circTRAKs, or you'd be passing it around to get everybody scanning. So I think this is the one report that we probably still process manually at the shelves, and people do it better.
We're having more questions coming in, so trying to field these. The next one that we've gotten a couple times is, can I use my circTRAK for weeding the collection, and can you speak to how weeding can be done more thoroughly?
Sure. I actually have a slide. I kind of thought this might be a question. Yes, absolutely. So in your ILS, you're already creating your weed list, weed reports. Do that as you normally would. And then in the ILS, batch change that weed list to an unavailable status, whatever your ILS allows. Weed, unavailable, something that puts it into an exception status. And then the next time circTRAK scans, it finds all of those weed candidates. Notice I don't say scan just for weeds. Let weeds be part of the exceptions that you're finding anytime that you scan. So in my library, former library, we would place weeds on the bottom shelf of the truck, and they were just a part of the regular cleanup of exceptions process. So yes, you definitely can use circTRAK for weeding. Just let it become another weed candidate. And that's true for anything that you want to pull from the shelves. Simply set it into an unavailable status and let circTRAK do its work.
Another question that we're getting quite a number of people asking is, how does circTRAK work with metal shelving?
Well, when a library asks that question, I think they probably are asking if they can gather every barcode on a shelf by using circTRAK. The caution I would offer is that RFID technology can be interrupted by metal, as we know, and it doesn't scan in a linear fashion. So it's not scanning your materials left to right. It's scanning in a sphere, or around a globe around the shelf. So you're not getting every item in a line. You can, if you want to, you can insert the blade into the between the item and the shelf end. If you're gathering barcodes for an inventory, that's probably an extra step you need to take. But on the other hand, if you're doing dynamic status check, it's not as important. You're not gathering all barcodes to perform an inventory. You're looking for exceptions. And so I would say let the scan go, let it find what it finds, and you'll catch things that were missed this time, you'll catch the next time. So it doesn't become an exercise of taking every barcode on the shelf.
We've had a couple questions about how does the circTRAK work with various ILS systems. So Gretchen, can you explain a little bit how it interfaces, whether libraries are using III or Polaris or Horizon or any of the ILS companies that are out in the marketplace?
Sure. All the major ILSs offer SIP connectivity. You probably already have a number of third-party products that use SIP to connect to the ILS for transactions. circTRAK is just another of those products that connects via a SIP connection. So that's not a problem. There are differences in the responses that are sent from the ILS back to circTRAK. And the sales consultants here at TechLogic can talk to you about your particular ILS and what's returned when the query comes back from the ILS. But in terms of connection, it's just like any other SIP connected product. So there should not be a problem in connecting and getting to your ILS.
Kind of a tangential question to that. Does the circTRAK work with RFID tags from various vendors, or does it only work with TechLogic RFID tags?
Oh, no, it doesn't need to be tags from TechLogic. The tags have been standardized for, golly, 15 plus years. We've had a standard in the field, and those tags are readable. Of course, we're happy to test the tags. If you have a question, we can take a sample of tags, make sure that that's true. Sometimes our sales reps are equipped to do that. They visit your library and they can do a test with your tags in your building. But no, the tags are common enough across the industry now that that should not be a problem.
We have a couple questions here asking about finding, does the circTRAK help in finding items that have a damaged RFID tag or a missing RFID tag? And can we speak to the workflow of finding those items that may be missing a tag?
Well, remember, circTRAK is listening for tags. So if the tag is damaged, it's unable to transmit a signal, or it's missing, there's nothing to listen to. Actually, an AMH is better at finding those problems because when a material moves over an AMH, it recognizes that there is an item and can't read the tag. It's either missing or damaged, and so it can place those into exceptions. But circTRAK won't hear a tag that isn't there.
We have one question with a participant who was using the circTRAK and they want to scan thin items such as picture books or slimline DVDs. Can you speak to how circTRAK can assist in scanning these areas of the collection and be more efficient?
It's probably an issue of speed when you're in those very narrow items, that your speed is reduced in order to get more of the items. You can move them. You saw in the video scanning DVDs by sort of fanning the items in the bins. You could do that and take a slower scanning approach. Remember, again, you're looking with dynamic status check for exceptions. So you're not gathering barcodes. One question I've often had is, what about, what about the strict no inventory rule? What about taking an inventory of just the DVD collection? And I would say that makes sense if your purpose is to replace missing titles. If that's an area of the collection that you will spend replacement dollars, you might want, and it may also be a candidate for materials leaving the library without being checked out. You could do barcode gathering with circTRAK and gather barcodes and then process just the DVD collection in the ILS. So that's one area where I would say it may behoove you to do that if in fact you're replacing those materials. Oftentimes, we are not replacing missing materials across the rest of the collection.
One other question, on the circTRAK display, what information is displayed when you are scanning the items? So we can jump back to the video here, Gretchen, if you want to speak to that.
Well, on the found list, the left side, you're getting the status, current status, call number, if that's available from the ILS, title, and what we call item ID, barcode number. So there you're seeing what's available. And I do recommend that you pull the materials as you're scanning so that they're ready to go to the back room and be handled. The exceptions are ready to be handled. There's no sense in creating another list to come back and find. Just go ahead and pull them as you're scanning, put them onto a book truck and into the back room.
All right. I guess there's really one other question, unless anyone has any additional questions that you'd like to submit here in the next couple minutes. Gretchen, can you touch again on how the wand connects to the ILS and what sort of network configuration the library needs in regards to Wi-Fi connectivity, staff network compared to a private network? How is that configured for staff to be able to use this wand out within their stacks?
Well, without getting into any technical configuration of the connection, it's essentially you're using your building Wi-Fi for a secured connection, probably a staff Wi-Fi connection or a network segment, so that it is secured back to the ILS. And you're probably already doing that if you're doing other staff activities. One thing I would say is circTRAK, if you haven't used any devices out in the stacks before, you may identify weak signals or no signal in some areas of the library. We did find that in a couple of places. We hadn't planned for Wi-Fi in the stacks. We'd planned for Wi-Fi in patron serving areas. So in a couple cases, we added access points so that we were able to have a good Wi-Fi connection throughout the building and throughout the stacks. And for your particular network configuration, I'd say talk with a sales consultant. They've looked at hundreds of these, so it's a familiar question for them. Anthony, I often get a question I'll answer here that a library will tell me they've tested circTRAK by counting materials on a shelf and then scanning to see if it collected every barcode. Again, that's a traditional inventory exercise, and that's not what I recommend using circTRAK to do. Because of some of the limitations of RFID scanning, it's not an efficient use of your time, and really you're accomplishing your goals with finding materials and resolving patron issues if you're doing a quick scan for exceptions and you do it regularly. So take that labor, put it into regular scanning of the collection, and I think you'll be pleased with the results.
All right. We haven't had any other questions come in, so we're getting close to our 10:45 cutoff time. So I think we will go ahead and move on. Thank you everyone for participating in this webinar today. If there were any questions, I have a list of all the questions. I was trying to get all of them answered and make sure that all of them were addressed, but if for some reason I missed one, I apologize. We will follow up with all of the questions after this presentation. So if we didn't address yours specifically, I assure you, you will get an answer. And also, if any questions come up after we've ended this webinar or after you review it with your staff members and think on it a little bit, please feel free to reach out to Gretchen and I. You can send us an email at webinar@techlogic or tech-logic.com. That email will go to both of us, and we'll be able to address those questions, whether you have those today, tomorrow, a week from now. We're happy to answer those questions for you and get all of your questions answered. As I said, there will be a video recording of this presentation that's posted on our website. It'll be at tech-logic.com/education portal. An email will follow up after we close this webinar session in about an hour. That will include both the webinar at TechLogic email address and our education portal web address. So if you're not jotting it down on notes right now, it will be in your inbox in about an hour's time. But unless there are any other questions that come in here last minute, I'd like to say thank you for participating in the webinar today. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future about how circTRAK can help out your library.
Thanks, everyone.